Dragon Age Origin came out in 2009, and 14 years later, this game has been reduced to a pile of shit. I'm joking. This game is just incredible. This game blew me away in ways that I could never imagined that it would when I first heard of it, or decided I was going to give it a try. Now, I played this game back in the later half of 2023, and all these months later, I've enjoyed the game just as much, if not even more, during my first playthrough, if you can even believe that. Now, I will go a bit more into why that is and how new players and even returning players, how you can greatly improve your gaming experience in a game that is well over a decade old at this point. But for now, let's get into what makes this game so good. One of the most impressive achievements of Dragon Age Origin that I don't see gets talked about enough is this gloomy and depressing atmosphere that this game has. This is very much a dark fantasy fiction, and the game makes it very clear without the need to shove a whole lot of blood and gore right on your face, which, don't get me wrong, there's a whole lot of gores, but playing a human mage as my first character, you don't get as much bloodshed or carnage in the first few missions, but just taking a look at your surroundings, the shelves, the tables, just the environment, right? You get this eerie and haunting feel to it. What I mean by this is when you take a look at these walls, for example, see how rusty everything looks. You got molds, stain-looking substances on the textures. Everything in this game looks so decayed and weathered. Even the characters have these gritty designs. Like, a lot of them straight up look dehydrated or an hour short of starvation. Some look beaten, and you can just tell they have been through some BS, just the way they look. The way these characters speak, their facial expression and their tone, you really do get this sense that people have just lost hope altogether. Now, when the game does want to get bloody, oh, it does, because holy crap, this game is gruesome. You can almost smell the blood right off the screen, but most importantly, it makes sense why there's so many carnages. It's not just being edgy, right? You don't just see gore for the sake of seeing them, but as I mentioned, the game setting take place in a time when war and civil unrest is at its highest. The game does not hold your hand in any way when it showed itself in full light. It's such a masterful use of environments that I just had to put this on the list. Now let's get into the big one, the combat system. And I'm going to break this down into two parts, because while I try to stay as close to the original game as I can for this video, I just have to mention certain mods for this segment because they make the gameplay feel so much smoother and faster. But first, the basic game features uses a real-time with pause combat system, where this means that you can pause the game at any time to issue commands to your party members or your companions. The whole appeal of this mechanic is for you to pause and make your moves or strategize. In addition, you can have a party of up to 4 characters or companions, and you can thankfully adjust their roles however you like, and even have them on standby if you don't want them to engage in fights or assist you in any way, which is what I do, because I personally like to go solo when it comes to combat, rather than have companions or AI giving me buffs, heals, or just doing damages to the enemies. I prefer to just go completely solo when it comes to getting in fights. I just gotta say, thank God this isn't a turn-based combat system, because that would have really turned me off from even considering playing the game. Don't get me wrong, I do love a great storytelling, but I just can't stand slow progression due to combat mechanics such as turn-based. I always find it to be really unnecessary. I don't understand why you would put a turn-based combat system over a real-time or a fast-paced, like a real action combat. Thankfully, we don't have to worry about that in this game, because you can pause the game or you can just let it play it in real time. There are really only extreme rare cases where turn-based to me is justified, and this would not be one of those games. You have 3 classes in Dragon Age Origin, as well as 3 races. We got the mage, warrior, and rogue, and for the races we have elf, humans, and dwarves. Now the mage is limited to human and elf, while the warrior and rogue can be of any race. I'm just saying, but you can use mods to remove the limiter if you want. But with that being said, anyone who has ever played this game will tell you just how much more powerful the mage class is compared to the other 2. It's not even fair in comparison because the mage class can even be played as a melee and it can perform even better than a warrior or a rogue. While some may see this as a balance issue, I think it was intentionally done so to adhere or stay close to the lore and the story as much as possible, because you will find that in this world, mages are often feared upon for their magical prowess, and even a low tier mage can cause a lot of casualties. So I think they were just trying to stay as true to that as they possibly can, even when it comes to the class and the combat system. Overall, I think the combat in this game is okay for what it is. Like I said, the mage is easily the most fun and overpowered of all the classes, and the amount of large AoE spells you can cast to just decimate enemies, it's just far surpass anything that the other two melee classes can do. If I'm being honest, I wouldn't even touch the warrior or rogue class in the original game alone because of how stiff and slow the gameplay is for melee. And at least with the mage, you have haste, which is a spell that increases your running attack speed, and it helps that you have so many abilities, spells, and builds to choose from in your arsenal. If you're someone who's looking to get into the melee classes, or if you find that the gameplay in the game is a bit too slow for your liking, I strongly recommend the mods because they will just make everything better, faster, and you'll be able to go through the game in a lot more timely manner. I'm not saying you're going to speed run through it, but it's going to be a more reasonable pacing. Okay, a lot more satisfying, I can tell you that. Considering this game came out well over a decade ago at this point, and seeing what mods are capable of in recent times, there is just no reason, if I'm being honest, why you shouldn't install them if you can, as they really only made the game better in every imaginable way possible. One of the greatest RPG of all time isn't without one of the best storytelling, characterization, and world building that I have pleasure of experiencing. The amount of choices you get to make and how your character comes into fruition as a Grey Warden from the origin that you chose at the beginning is so good and fitting. Now, you do get a brief history lesson in the intro cinematic, but don't worry if you didn't pay attention. There really isn't much you can gather or contextualize just based on that, especially if you're new. Instead, you will come to learn more about the various elements and pieces of history that make up this world and its conflicts through dialogues, random encounters, and through the choices that you make. The game does not hold back when it comes to a bleak display of life in this universe or in this world. In my personal opinion, the City Elf is easily the best backstory. This origin story felt so personal. I mean, that dude, whatever his name was, I'll probably put on the screen, but he had whatever was coming to him. Sorry, but that dude was a BS. It really puts you on some blood-hungry rampage when you see some of the bullcrap these human characters put the elves through. I also love the werewolf storyline. I have always been a fan of werewolves mythology, so walking into that forest and uncovering the mystery behind the curse was just fan service to me. And even though I'm fairly new to the franchise, I would like to get into some specifics, but I do want to keep this as spoiler free as possible. So I can't really say much more than that, but it incorporates the best aspect of pretty much every fantasy fictions you have come across. What I also love is the length of the main game or the story. The main quest line averages about 30 to 40 hours from what I looked into, even if you were to run through it as fast as possible, but generally, from my experience, you can easily expect around 50 to 60 hours of contents, main contents, not side quests, and more depending on how much extra errands or side quests that you partake in. For me, my total hours came in around 100 hours. But to be honest, a good portion of it is just me leaving the game on and not closing it and being AFK while the counter is running or is still active. In truth, it was more like 70 to 80 hours for me, which is still pretty damn long, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But there is no limit to how many hours I would really put in a game like this that's legitimately great. I love how you go through the different cities or points in the map, and every once in a while you'll come across like a random encounter or an in-game cinematic that triggers when you complete a phase or a chapter. It really makes you feel like the world is reacting to your choices and your decisions. There is no specific order in which you have to complete the map, as far as I'm concerned, from what I understand, as everything will come to a culmination or a climax before the finale, and you do get to make key choices that will shape the ending. So feel free to go whatever order you like. The story just feels so well written and complete, which is something many games have difficulty conveying. By the end of the game, there was but one thing I wish the game had more of: more content. That's why I actually wanted more from the game, despite putting nearly 70 to 80 hours into it. It does become very emotional in the end, depending on which race origin you chose. But it's a closing to a game that you will probably remember for the rest of your gaming history or your RPG gaming. And if I have to rate the game, I would give it an 8 out of 10 for the original game alone, without any mods. And a lot of this is due to, once again, a great story and world constructions, but the outdated, slow and stiff combat system does hold the game back quite a lot. With the mods, however, the game is easily a 10 out of 10, even 11. With that being said, I would strongly recommend trying the game out with the mods if you're looking to get into the game. But other than that, see you next time.